Hey, Reza, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing fantastically. It's Friday morning for me, even earlier Saturday morning for you. Just turned 6 a.m., yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, just come out of 6 a.m.
I'm very excited and happy that you're able to tune in today. I know I was we did one together on your channel slash like a group down there, and and that was a lot of fun. I
Correct.
know we've known each other now for a few years with kind of through the MVP program and just the conference circuits and everything, and of course the conference that I'll even be presenting at that you're like single-handedly basically putting on this year. So that's amazing. I want to do a quick little introduction for everybody in here. Just logistically for anybody tuning in, if you have any questions as we go through stuff today, go ahead and drop them into the chat window and I'll help moderate those over to Reza. Helpful if you kind of put a queue at the beginning of those for questions. Otherwise, yeah, like I said, our history goes back a few years now. Of course, I see the very humbling number of MVP awards and everything else that you have on your wall there. I got my three chips. Yeah, three, and I'll get to yours someday. But it's I think you've been doing this now for we're at what number 13 or something like that now, 14
Like
MVPs.
no, 10 years actually. No, 10 years.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
you'll you'll get
yeah,
you'll get more than that definitely.
it'll be the next one I'm excited for is to getting one of those blue chips that you have that that represents the five. I think I don't know if you were a part of it, but I know there was that entertaining Twitter conversation that we had some MVPs had on like actually how you're supposed to stack them. Like, do you actually include all
Mm.
five plus the five chip? Do you get rid of them? I think it was either Marco or Alberto who made a really funny joke about like they rearranged theirs randomly. I prefer to sort mine by random. It was like some DAX function, and it just showed their chips in a completely erratic order. That was just one of those like painful to look at things.
Yeah, yeah. The one that was quite interesting and rare to see was that I've seen some people with like 20 years, and that is not something you'll see that much.
I feel like at some point you should have like your standard stack trophy, and then after X number of years, they should give you like a secondary just trophy that represents a 20-year or a 30-year milestone, you know? Like
Yeah.
when you get your 21st chip, I think they should commemorate it with a crystal mug, like a crystal beer glass or something when you turn 21, or at least for the US based ones.
Yeah, that is like quite an achievement thinking about like 20 years. It's like almost like a career lifetime.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it still blows me away each time I get mine. It's like, oh, it's already been 3 years. It feels like yesterday the first time I even got nominated.
Mhm.
So
It goes so fast. Yeah, that's right.
But I'd love to give you a chance to give a little background about yourself. And for those curious, there's a few links for Reza down below, plus his upcoming Power. It used to be Divinity, but now it's Power BI Summit, right? Is the like the global
So
summit, I think.
still, like they are not exactly the same thing. So Definity is more like an in-person conference. It's
Okay,
happening in New Zealand. It's more like local,
sure.
regional. This is a specific, let's say, version of it. It's all about Power BI versus Definity was everything Power BI,
Hmm.
AI, data platform, Power Platform. So Power BI Summit is like basically all about Power BI, and it is happening virtual, like a kind of the same momentum but different routes, let's say,
Okay.
doing two different things, and this is quite going to be quite exciting. So the biggest conference, Power BI, and exciting to have you there as well.
Yeah, and that's actually good to know. Is I was curious if this was kind of a transition and a rebranding, but like you said, this seems to be more of like at least as of this year, due to the virtualness of everything,
Mm,
that's this one. But there will
correct.
be back when we do in-person conferences, Divinity in that name will come back then.
Yes, yes, definitely. Like we can still run it in New Zealand. New Zealand is not that much bad in terms of COVID situation. We are lucky with that. But the thing is that
Yeah.
one of the perks of this conference for a lot of people attending was that we got so many like high quality speakers from all around
Mm.
the world coming, and because borders are now closed, so we can't really have that happening. So we are waiting for everything to go back to normal and have that back again. Until
Hmm.
then, we'll do things virtually.
Yeah, and I mean, I know like the first year I got my MVP, I believe you even personally invited me to present at that one, but I had just gotten back from Australia, New Zealand
Mm,
like a month and a half before, and it was just one of those like
mm,
I couldn't. quite do another like 25-hour flight each way,
Yes.
because the jet lag is a little rough, especially when you're not flying like business class. But I definitely, as soon as it comes back up again, I need to make a trip back to New Zealand because I've only done the South Island, and I really want to explore the North Island, and I think that would be a very easy pairing to do that in February or so, because that would be the tail end of your summer, right?
Yes, and that is one why normally we have it in February, because normally like January is quite high temperature. I mean, it's not never close to the temperature you get in Florida or other places like that, but it is like quite like warm. I would say February and March normally a better month for exploring New Zealand. March a little bit rainy in Auckland. Other parts of the New Zealand is fine. So that is why we selected that specific period, mainly because it would be a chance for our speaker also to go around and visit New Zealand. That's not a chance happens all the time, considering New Zealand is far away from everywhere else.
Yeah, one does not simply fly into New Zealand without exploring the nature.
Correct. Yes, that's right.
Yeah, it's still one of the few places I'd say outside of parts of Scandinavia, Alaska, and Washington. New Zealand's one of the few places that I've been to that has more like majestic nature than other places that I've been to. I like to describe it as if there was a designer of Earth, it was the person who put cheat codes on when they built the nature in New Zealand. It's just it's nothing but mountains, rivers, ocean, and every direction you turn is a picturesque thing that it looks like an Instagram photo you would spend 2 hours to drive to, but it's just on the side of the road.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's a beautiful place that is all accessible very close.
exactly. But yeah, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but I'd love to give you a chance. Like, is there anything you'd like to share either about yourself or anything you or Layla are currently
Oh,
up to?
sure, yep. I'm working at Radicad. If any of like attendees doesn't know, we are a consulting and training company mainly focusing on Power BI. We also run some community conferences, as Reed already explained, Definity and Power BI
Very
Summit
big.
coming. Um, we have a lot of also Power BI content in our website, many of them free available. Go and check that out. And we also have a YouTube channel. We had him speaking, I think it was like about a year ago, right? Something like that.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it was like almost a year ago he had a live stream on our channel. So lots of interesting content over there. We would like to hear your feedback, and that's pretty much me. You can connect to me on Twitter, LinkedIn. Links are in the YouTube page, and would love to talk with you all here.
Yeah, and thanks for that. And I also just want to mention, like, a lot of the stuff that I think you do, even within your specialty, is you're very versed in Power Query. I'd put you,
Mm.
up there with Ken Pulse, Miguel, Imke. I'm just trying to make sure I can actually hit all of the people that I know who do like a lot of Power Query stuff. I'm sure I probably missed somebody in there, but yeah, you blog quite a bit about that stuff, and even honestly, one of your articles about capturing error handling was something I actually even incorporated with I mentioned to you into one of my talks where I kind of do a Power Query 101 of optimization, and just here's a really easy way, like if you actually want to be able to export your things to a table where you create the records, basically extract the data out. Like it's pretty easy. You barely have to touch the M code, and it's such a simple way to just add a column, pop it out, and then you get you can extract the data and put it somewhere else in the system for storage or stuff if you actually are wanting to do any kind of tracking of what errors and conversion might be happening.
Yeah, that's right. That actually, like the first time I had that situation was actually a time that like we got error a lot, but that specific customer asked that how can I capture this error before it happens? So that was like when the whole idea came in to build something like that as a report.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not complicated, it's easy, but it is really helpful for a lot of use cases.
And I've done something not quite that, but I remember years ago because the model can still load if you have a conversion error. It will finish refreshing. You just get an error message, and like that's one of the things that can be dangerous about it. It doesn't actually stop the entire refresh, but it throws more of a warning rather than it doesn't fault. And I know that happened a couple of times, like way back 5-6 years ago at Microsoft. and they wanted a way to be able to like get a notification on the page. So I remember doing kind of a similar kind of if case. I exported to a table, which would then feed into like a single row that basically would then have a visible thing on the page that would say if the last refresh had any kind of a conversion error to let them know that they're probably missing some rows of data because of that.
Correct. I would say this is worse than having an actual error, because if there's an error, if there's a blocking error, if something stops the whole report, you know that something is not working, right? Because there's error. This type of error, I would say, like you'll notice it only like if you check your scheduled refresh history or check the email coming to you. Otherwise, the values are changing. Like instead of the value there, you'll get null, but you think it is null. In fact, it is not null. So I would say this is worse than happening an error. So better to catch it, definitely.
And there's also, I know you can build the model, you can do like try functions to also actually stop the refresh from happening if you get an error. So there's a way to build that in, but I really do wish, and I'm now just only thinking of this, but it would be lovely in the settings for that model if you could toggle something that says if there is any conversion type errors, stop the refresh. It would be great if that was just a switch you could flip to actually tell it to completely stop the scheduled refresh, fail it, send a notification to the admin, or let it run with missing data. Because I mean, I feel like most people, most of the time, like I can't imagine too many scenarios where you would want it to still continue to refresh versus rolling back to the previous version essentially and stopping the refresh. So I'm actually, I wonder if that's an idea anywhere on Power BI ideas is, toggle for stopping refresh upon conversion type error.
Yeah, like everything when it comes to Power Query, because Power Query more looks like a behind the scene of Power BI, the ideas of Power Query to get them quite upvote, it takes quite a lot of time because most of people vote for like visualization features first, or even DAX, especially if it helps of Marco and Alberto promoting it. But yeah, for Power Query, it takes a little time to get the votes up for those.
No, I'm actually going to make a note to go look for that later, and if not, I think I'm going to actually submit that as an idea. That's because again, you can build it in, but you need to know how to write M, and you'd have to create some table in your model to check for an error across any of your tables, and then run a stop refresh stop, or basically just break that query, which would then break all of them. But that definitely would take a bit of time and effort.
I'm sure we'll have something like this sometime, because even these days, if we compare what Power Query was with like 2015, it's like massively changed the UI. So I'm sure something like this would be available. We have to just wait for Miguel and Power Query team to take care of these.
Exactly. But yeah, with that, I know like that's one of the things we're going to be talking about, and I know you have a few other things as well, like Power Query related to go over. Did you want to get started, or?
Oh, yep. I can show you like a demo on that. So I don't really have a slide. I'm basically just showing you about demos. So like to show that very first scenario, like this first scenario is situation that we have a report that is failing at the refresh time. Now we would see that fail in the refresh time in Power BI Desktop, but it doesn't really happen that much obvious when the report is published in the service unless you go and notice the notification for that. So I'll get, for example, data from an Excel file. Like this is a sample data set I just built for this example. By the way, all of these things I'm explaining, I have blog posts about it. So if someone is interested, go and check that out. So it's just a customer table I have. Now, a lot of time this happens that people just get that and start loading it. But just before loading it, I want to go to transform data to show that in the default view, there is no actually error happening over there as well. So like this is a table, I can come to this table, and this little green bar, as we know, is showing actually like if there's any errors or how many empty values we have. Normally, it shows some red signs if there's an error, and I don't really have any error. But the fact is that this is not about the entire data, and that is where part of the whole things comes in. So if I load this data into Power BI, what happens is that I'm actually getting an error where it's supposed to be no error. Now, there are a few things here. One is, I'm waiting for this error to happen. Okay, so here, for example, I see the error happens. Now, imagine if this was in Power BI website, like we wouldn't see that, but we would get a notification that something happened on the refresh. And if we don't notice it, if we just go and look at our reports, we won't really know anything happening. So it's important to see what the errors are and catch it before that. And now I'm just going to Power Query. Yep, here it is. Okay, now Power Query has this thing that is kind of like error handling in Power BI Desktop when something fails. So it automatically creates this little query inside this folder saying that these error rows happened, right? It's helpful normally to find out where the errors is happening. In this case, my errors are happening in a birth date column.
So I've always been curious, and it again with anybody like you and me, when we spend 1,000 hours, probably a year going through this stuff, is I've always wondered why they named the folder with the date time, because there's only, well, I mean that folder can have in theory multiple errors, right? Depending on how many tables actually had an error in your, it's pretty rare that I've ever seen more than one show up in there, but I've always wondered like why they don't put the label on the query name itself, rather than the folder.
That is one thing. Another thing is that like if you fix the error, then this query basically would be blank next time when you come to here, right? So I mean, there is no point to have it on their folder with that name. But yeah, I I think that is like something needs to be fixed a little bit on the design.
Exactly.
Right. So I see that, for example, birth date column is the column that failed here. Now, few things. One, why we didn't catch that in here. So first thing is that Power Query is always working on a preview of data. A lot of us, when we look at the records, we think that this is all the data, but in fact it is not. Also, these information we see here, which is called profiling information, these are basically is for the first 1,000. Unless we go and change it here and say, show me for the entire data set, then we would see that there's an error happening. But the fact is that if you do it, that is probably going to kill the performance of your Power Query development, especially if you are working with tables with like millions of rows. So that is not a function that I normally recommend. So what is the best way to capture it? One way is that we can actually use this approach to get the error rows, but I'm going to explain how we can do it ourselves instead of using that. So I can, I'm removing that folder as well with that timestamp on it. So I'm going to have a version of this table that has errors in it, and a version of this table that doesn't have errors in it. The one that doesn't have errors in it, I'll use it in my normal reporting. It would have all the rows except those rows that something happened on it. And the version that has errors on it, I would use it for error handling and showing to the user that something happened. Because most of the time, these errors are because of something wrong in the data source. And that is where user can probably go, and if they have access to the data source, for example, Excel file, they go and check it, they fix it. In the next refresh, it automatically fixes everything. So I'll create a reference from this. Reference from a table means basically like you'll keep whatever in that table is. From that step onward, you'll create a new table. And in this table, I'm going to that column that caused the error, here, birth date. And I say, well, on this one, remove rows, remove errors. This is one of the reasons why we have remove errors, so that we have a clean data set. So if there is any error happening on this column, it would not be in my result set. So that row with the error in this column would not be in my result set. And if I do that, then I would call this one my original table or something like that. I would say I'm not loading that table into Power BI. but I want to load this table, and I'm going to call it just normal in customer. So this would be the table that I use in my reporting. Now, this is not, of course, enough, because I didn't really solve the situation. I just skipped those rows that are failing. So what would complete this is that if I create like another copy of this, like
The analogy I always think of is just the like if you're trying to like clean up or anything, it's like in the cartoons where you sweep everything under the rug. You didn't really fix the problem, but you've made it disappear.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You have to do something with it. So I'll get a new reference, and this time I'm going to call this my error rows. So basically, this is going to be even more important than the original table. This is the table that I want to keep the errors and show it to my users so that they can see that error and do something about it. And the way we can do it is, again, go to that birth date column, but instead of remove rows, we do this option, keep rows and keep errors. And that is funny. Like a lot of time when I teach Power Query, when I get to this section before explaining an example like this, a lot of people say, why we have something like keep errors, or why we have keep duplicates? Who wants to do that? And then after I explained it, then they realize why it is there.
Yeah.
So one of the main reasons we have these is exactly to create a troubleshooting report. So if I say keep errors, then this would be a table with all error rows. So it's actually a table source for my troubleshooting. So now I know exactly how many rows, which rows belong to, let's say, which customer key fails. But this is, again, not the entire solution, because if I say close and apply, I'm going to still get this error because the error is still here, right? And it would basically, because this type of error, because this particular type of error would replace it with null when it loads into Power BI. So it would just tell me that there's an error in these rows, but then it wouldn't tell me like what that error is.
So I have a
here we have like a...
I have a quick logistical question for you. So I know at least when it generates the auto queries based off the errors, it has a reordered rows in the last one. I normally thought that's supposed to take your error columns and put them on the far right to kind of make them easy to find, so you don't have to sit there and scroll through a bunch of columns. But like on yours, and I've seen some examples where it does. It actually reorders the error column to the far right just so you can go find it at the end. And the other times I still find it in the middle somewhere. So I feel like it inconsistently reorders the columns to basically allow you to go to error, you know?
Yeah, depends on how that error happens. Sometimes the error happens because we merged another table and things like that. In those situations, it might come like at the end. Yeah. As you said, it's not really that much consistent in terms of like where that column would appear in a result set. Yeah, but it would be definitely a column with the error.
I did actually have a good question. Just one other follow-up from somebody in the chat about this is like if you had errors in multiple columns. So I'll at least speak to the reordering. I don't think you will put all of them on the side, but each column that has an error in it, any rows from that table that have an error, even if they're from separate columns, will still all show up in the error query. You just might have row 1 to 5 with, you know, in the output, erroring from column A, rows 6 through 10 is coming from another one, but you'll still have the entire collection of every error on any row across any column in that single query, as long as it's coming from, you know, just the dim customer as an example.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yes. And I have like an example. I have like another demo that I'll explain how to do it when we have multiple columns. So,
perfect.
Depends on time. If we get to that, I'll show it to you definitely. Okay, right. So we know that there's error here. Now we cannot load it just like that because then we wouldn't know what the error is. Like the ideal for me would be to get this information. Like one of the ways to find what that is to don't click on the error because it will drill down. Just click somewhere blank in that cell and then look at this explanation. So this is much more useful to me than showing a null value here. right? So I would prefer to have this because I'll see what exact value was in the source, what is the error. So I would like to get this information. Now, there is an easy way to get that information. It's not a built-in functionality, unfortunately. You have to just write almost like 2 words. It's not that much complicated. You'll add a column, add a custom column. This is a place that you can write your M script. Now, this is not a session about M script, and I'm not going into the details of that. But try is a very helpful keyword in Power Query. When you say try, after try, you can run an expression. It's like a try-catch situation we have in many programming languages. Like if that expression fails, it gives you the option to do something. Let's say, for example, if it fails, it's like run this expression. If it fails, do this. If it doesn't fail, give me the result of that expression. That's what the try is.
It's very, very useful in a lot of just to build on that. It's a very useful expression that I ended up actually teaching Miguel Escobar a use of this. So I have a Google Analytics report that I make, and a lot of people kept coming back kind of with generic error messages when it was an issue, and I wanted to figure out a way to provide some detail in the error. So I actually created a custom text string to pop up as the error message, telling them to contact me. And I basically tried an entire query name. If that fails, return this custom error message with my contact info and email that back. And yeah, even Miguel had never actually used up until that point when I think I might have asked, it was you or somebody else who is there any way to basically test a query, an entire query of whether or not it fails? And so it works very well just to basically just try this thing, whether or not it's a step in a query or or anything else. It's basically it's an attempt to execute, which is what it does.
Yeah, that's right. And there are 2 ways to run it. One way is just to run try. For example, I can say try 1 divided by 0, right? And this would return something like an error. Or I can say try this otherwise. So otherwise is saying that, for example, if this happened, then show me, for example, error by 0 happened. Okay, it should be like inside this. Like
yeah, hold on. Can you actually use otherwise? I've always used else. Is otherwise actually a valid? Did I just learn something new?
Yes.
Huh.
Yeah. Otherwise is a valid statement. I actually never used else. Else might be something added recently.
No, I've been using like if else, like if statements or if else, and I've been using that for like 6 or 7 years. I never knew otherwise was another. Are they basically the same thing, like else or otherwise?
Yeah. This is like else for try. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Just I always get excited if I learn like a little bit of something new. So interesting.
That's good.
Okay.
Right. Okay. So now in this case, I don't really need otherwise because I know the error happening. I just want to catch the information for that. So the error is happening from birthday column. So I'll just select birthday column here. So this is basically just saying that try that column and whatever expression in that column is. In this case, whatever has happening in there that is causing the error, which is probably like a date type conversion. So I click on OK. This will create a new column, but you see this time I don't really see error. I see a record. A record in Power Query is a structure that has multiple columns. It's like 1 row, multiple columns. It just showed like this. Here it looks like more multiple rows than multiple columns. It's just showed this way because if you have too many columns, it's much easier to navigate down, to like scroll down rather than scrolling to the right. That is why the record is showed this way. But in fact, consider it as a row. And these are my column headers. So basically, I have like 2 columns. 1 column is saying that it has error. All of these has error. Obviously, we know it. And this is the most important part, the error, which is a record itself, like a record within a record. That happens quite a lot in Power Query structures. I can expand it. I can say, well, I don't want has error. I already know that has error. I just want the error. So I get the error. This time, this is that record inside the other record. When I click on that, that is where all this information is. So it's 1 row with 3 columns in it. The reason for the error, the message, and the detail. The detail is actually the value coming from the original column that caused those errors. So I want all of these. I'll expand it and I say, well, give me that and put that error column name as the original for this, as the prefix for this. And then I have all the error information here. So it tells me that what was the original value, what is the error reason. Most of these are because of data formatting, and the error messages. And once I have it, then I can easily go and remove this. I mean, if I don't remove it, it would be replaced by null anyway. But I don't like to see that error message, so I'm going to just remove it. And I have everything I need over here. This is a query that is totally safe to load into Power BI. So when I say close and apply, it will be loaded here. And then I can start doing a report on it. Okay, so I've got like 2 tables, and they don't need to be related to each other because you don't produce a report out of both of them together. So this is totally different report. You can do some like simple reporting, like for example, a card visual. Any of these columns doesn't matter. You just get there, and then you get the count of that value. This would be the count of your error rows. Of course, putting a proper title for it. Error count or something like that. Then you can have your error details in a table, like error reason, error message, error detail. You can have a slicer and things like that for it. You can build a pretty nice visual report for that. Reed is much more experienced in making visuals much more nicer than these. But the whole idea is to get this information. Like when your user come to the report, they go to here and they see, well, there's an error. They'll see what the error is. And most of the time, they have access to that Excel data source or whatever. They go and fix it. In the next refresh, that would disappear.
Yeah, and it's a great way just to provide that information out. And these days, you can also even take that and potentially fire that off as an email using a I still have to say Power Automate every time. A flow action. It just rolls off the tongue.
Like, so much mouthful.
Yeah, you got to use your Power App to Power Automate to the Power BI report on the Power Platform. But yeah, there's a lot of creative ways to take this out. I've not done it, but I can very much imagine a scenario where if this ever pops into the model in any sense, it could you could use a automate action to either kick it to a database or even send this as like a list in an email, basically letting IT or something know here's the records that they have to go update in some sense.
Yeah, that's right. And like one I would say really critical thing to do in Dataflows especially is to take care of error handling over there even more, because in Power BI Desktop it's normally much easier to catch the error. Like we can go and say, well, give me the data profiling for, let's say, over 1,000 records, give me for that entire data set. Now, Dataflow is not like that. Dataflow always give you like 100 rows, basically. So everything you see, all the information you see is based on that 100 rows. So it is important to do this kind of error handling for Dataflows even more than normal Power BI dataset.
I've continuously used them more and more, especially as they're adding additional features. I mean, I know like incremental refresh was one of the biggest ones, but they're very useful to create staging environments. And to, a lot of basically the latest features for Power Query nowadays, like the test environment, or better said, the release environment, it starts in Dataflows and works its way down to Power BI Desktop secondly. But the new and you can help me with the name. It's the environment where you can now design via user interface your transformations, and it has kind of like the little flow. What's the name for that again?
Power Query Online.
Well, yeah, but they just added that new feature where you don't just use the traditional Power Query editor. You have the connections where you could actually create the transformations from that. It just came out in preview like 2-3 months ago.
Okay, you mean the place that like when we say get data at that point, or like we choose the connectors?
you can also change data type. You can merge. You can do transformations, but it's part of a hierarchical tree chart. Yeah, they
Okay,
just added that
I've
recently.
not
I
seen
just
that.
can't remember the name of
Yeah.
it.
Okay, that's something I need to check out. I haven't seen that probably.
I'll send you the link later. Yeah, it's and I miss them occasionally unless I look at the blog because I'm normally just I don't do data flows development that often. But then I'll see
Mm.
like, oh, here's something I actually need to go to and check out data flows again just to see what this new experience is like. And then in 6 months, Power Query Desktop will get it.
Right. Isn't that like the new way that the dependency diagram looks like in Dataflow?
Yeah,
Probably.
basically like that. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, because the dependency diagram is like so advanced in Dataflow compared to what it is in Power BI Desktop. It shows like every query with all the steps. You can go and click on the steps. Really nice. Yeah, it might be that. Right. Now, considering like that question as well, which was like my kind of second example, is that in this case, we knew what column caused the error. So we did error handling on that specific column. What if we don't know what column is causing the error? So that is another one I'm going to show you now. Or if you want to discuss something else, Reed.
No, I was just checking the name of it. Yeah, you're right. It is just called the diagram
Okay.
view, but it provides the visual. It's the path that your transformations are taking, whether or
Yes.
not they split or
Yeah.
anything else. I love it. I just can't wait for it to come to desktop because I'm
Yeah.
super visual when it
That
comes
is really
to
nice.
building, and seeing the process flow from that perspective is really nice, especially when you can see the branches when it actually breaks off and does multiple things or any of that. Like that to me is golden.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely a very nice thing to add. Looking forward to it. Okay, so I have like the same table, but a little bit different data so that it causes failure in multiple columns rather than one column. So it's still the same dim customer table. But if I load it, let me just this time start with loading it and showing to you that the error happens in multiple places. And this one happens even more often than the first one because like usually if you are dealing with bad data, that happens like in more than one column rather than everything to be clean. Now waiting for the Power Query editor to come up. Okay, here it is. So this time in my error rows that produced automatically by Power Query, you see that sometimes I have errors in birth date column, sometimes I have it like in this column, number cars owned, or sometimes I have it in this column. So it's multiple
Yep.
columns that has this error. Now, again, finding the error is easy, but how to handle that and how to build that report that shows like which column has the error and what is the error message for that. This has almost everything similar to previous one, but with one little trick added to that. So I'm going to just explain that part
I do wish that
again. So
they
this is
added
my
one small feature with like, and you found them pretty quickly, but there are some times where unfortunately you have tables in your model that might have like 100+ columns in SQL. Like that's definitely a possibility, and it can be a little painful sometimes having to scroll through and trying to find it. I would love it if there was just either one of two buttons. Like there is a go to column. It would be great if there was a
yes,
way to like
go to error column.
yeah, or even go into there. There's a checkbox that says filter to columns with errors because once it's loaded in here, there should be metadata that identifies which column has an error somehow, and or there should be like a remove other columns that don't have errors. So you could either just strip out all the columns that except for the ones that do, or go to it. But I definitely know there's been a few times where I've had, again, just an obnoxiously large SQL table with a lot of date and time columns and a bunch of other stuff. And yeah,
Correct. Yes.
it takes a couple of minutes to try to like find all of them, and then wait, I've removed these errors, but there's still 5 left. Okay, I got to go through again, and somewhere in here there's and if there's 5 or 6 columns that have errors, each time you remove it, and you have 1,000 rows plus loaded, you're going to probably do this process a few different times. So it's one of
Yeah,
those
that's
where
right.
it technically all works. It's just they usually build they don't always build the best developer-friendly features versus the user-friendly ones. So it's one of those
Yeah, that's
small
right.
things that
Yeah,
would make it from good to great kind of a thing.
exactly. It makes developers' jobs much easier as well.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So similar approach to the previous one. I actually have an original table. I'm disabling the load of that one. I'm creating like a reference of this one. So this is going to be my table without errors. Now, one trick to say I want this without error across all columns is to, instead of clicking on a column and saying remove rows, remove errors, we click here. It's quite important in Power Query. Where do you click actually? You click on this little thing here, and then you say, well, remove errors. Now, this means remove errors everywhere from this table on any column, even if you have a column that is not at the moment here and adding later.
I have a quick question for you. So I've gone back and forth with a
Sure.
few different people on this. In general, you right click on a column, you have column transformations. Um, I generally
Mhm.
call that one up in the corner table transformations, though I have been
It is.
called out where it's like, yeah, but I've also like technically it's not a table, it's a query because it's a preview. It's not actually the table yet until it goes into the model. So it's one of those like,
Exactly.
is that misinformation to call it a table, or is that but it also says copy entire table. So it goes back and forth. I talked about this with Peter Myers at one point, and he's very insistent on like that he calls it query transformations because it is technically not yet an
Mhm.
actual table. But and so he doesn't want to confuse people by the terms because some people do think
Yeah.
this is my table already loaded, right? No. It's simply a preview of what your table will look like. So
Mhm.
I'm curious of just what you think about it.
Yeah. If we look at Power Query terms, in Power Query we don't really have like the concept of table. Table is a data structure. We have the
Mhm.
concept of query. A query can be a table, it can be a function, it can be parameter, it can be record or list. So these are basically like functions that looks like happening on a query. But the thing is that if your query is like a list, like for example, if I have a query like this, the way you can create a list, right? So if his query is a list, you see that I don't have that, right? So this is not
Mhm.
definitely list transformation
Exactly.
or record transformation. It's a set of transformation that you run on a query that is a table structure. So calling it table transformation, I would say it's still
Yep.
fair. I mean, I'm not normally uh, challenged on the name things, but I would say these are transformations that you run on a table structure.
And in general, these are also conversations that typically it's experts and people like you and me or other individuals who teach the stuff normally end up having
Mhm.
conversations of. But I actually like that
Yeah,
that analogy is it is the yes, it is transforming a query, but those transformations are only available on a query that is going to output to a table. So
exactly.
it's table transformations in a query.
Yes, yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Right. Okay. So using that option, we got the clean table. Now I'm using that option again to create my error rows. Okay, error rows, and again, similar to that, we use this table transformation or query transformation, whatever it is. And this time we are saying keep errors. So it means keep errors across everything. Now these days, Power Query become so much easier because like there used to be days that keep errors was not there. So in those days, you had to write the function like behind this, the function yourself. So make things much easier when the Power Query enhances. Now we got to the point that we have the table with all errors, but few things. One is that not all of these columns are causing errors. And if I have a table with 100 columns, like what you said, Reed, it would take me some time to go and find all those columns that cause error. Another thing is that it's not really, I mean, useful to go and say, well, add a column for birth date, try birth date, then add a column for, let's say, which one was the other one? Number cars owned, and that would be for that. Because these are happening at this time, error happening at this time. What about like let's say a column like this that doesn't have error now, but it might have error next time. So I need to find a way to make it more dynamic than doing it column by column. Now, there's a really simple but useful trick to do that. So what we want to achieve, it's easier when you think what you want to achieve first. So what we want to achieve is like a table like this. So I want to have, consider customer key is my like unique record key. You need to have like a unique record key, right? So let's say I have my key column here. I want to know what column and what is the error message, right? So this would be the type of, I'm trying to write with the mouse. Okay, so this would be the type of output I want, right? So I want the key of the column, the value, the key of that, the column name, for example, here said that like 12064. The column name is birth date, and the error is blah blah. Or the key is something else, the column is something else, and the error is like that. So this, as you look at it, is more like a unpivoted data. Like in Power Query, we have a transformation called unpivot, where whenever you apply it, it actually keeps your key column and pivot everything. Transpose everything else. It's like advanced transpose version, I would say. You can right-click on this column. Let's say this is my key column, and say unpivot other columns. And that is making the whole lot of difference, because now you see that I have the column name here, I have the value, and I'm not interested in those values that are all fine. I'm basically interested in those that cause errors. Now, this again wasn't this easy long time ago. Like even like this is changed recently. Pivot in Power unpivot in Power Query was a little bit buggy, I would say, for some time. A lot of people didn't know it because it was a specific situation that you faced that error. Like previously, not now, this is fixed already. If you had an error, your unpivot would have stopped at that error row, and you wouldn't see anything after this. This was a big problem with unpivot in Power Query for a long time. And actually, I wrote a whole blog explaining like an alternative method for that. It's not a really nice alternative method, but I'll just bring it here just to show you. Like this used to be like this. As soon as you get to the error row, the unpivot would have stopped there. So I used a different method, row indicator, and then get the record, convert it to a table. It's like a lot of process to get to that situation. But now it is fixed, so you don't really need to think about those methods. So you get this result, which is pretty nice. And the last thing you need to do here is just say, well, I want to keep errors. And then I have the key column, the key of the record, the column that caused the error, and the error itself, right? Which, when I have it, then the rest would be easy. I'll add a column, like similar to the previous one. And I say custom column, this is going to be try value.
And just the fact that like the only real M code you need to touch for any of this is one conditional column. Right.
Exactly.
Exactly. And like that's the only word you have to type. The other one you can just autocomplete by double clicking the column name. It's it just continues to show like how easy it is to do these kind of things versus SQL or anything else. Like Alteryx is one of the only things I can think of that could probably do anything close to this, but it's also 20 times the price.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and especially these days because that unpivot problem is fixed, because previously you had to do like a lot of extra steps, but now it's just like much.
I never actually knew that, because I've never done the multi-column error capturing like you did, but I didn't realize that there was actually I guess in this scenario, because I've seen that unpivot problem with errors before, just with working with my own data, but I wasn't trying to actually extract it. So it's nice to know that there's less steps needed to be able to get this with a clean output now.
Yeah, that is exactly the point. Like, because whenever we do unpivot in a normal situation and something fails, we go and fix that error because we want the data to be cleaned and then do unpivot. This type of situation only happens if you really want to capture that error in the unpivot.
Yep.
Right. So the rest is just basically like, I know this is happening with the error, similar to the previous one. I'll just get the error, and then I'll expand the error message, error detail, and I'll remove that. So now I have a table. The structure of this table is quite different from Team Customer itself, because in Team Customer I have a lot of other information, but for this one I just have this information. But it shows me like on every column what error I have, and it's totally dynamic. If next time you have an error on a different column, you'll catch it, and everything works perfectly fine.
Yeah, and it's basically depending, regardless of where the errors are kept in a table, there's a way to get it extracted pretty easily. And
Yes.
just the fact that they're continuing to make these backend improvements to make it easier and easier to extract these is a very, very positive thing going forward. Look, a few people have, oh yeah, Donald's much appreciating this. But yeah, I'm honestly like I can't think of too many scenarios where there's probably been at like a tenant level, if I'm building a lot of reports for an organization, I eventually start to do something where at least one report will need some type of capturing, especially if it's sadly any kind of flat file data sources. This doesn't happen too often. They feel like it's something like SQL or this stuff, because typically the input devices normally have catches where if you try to type a birthday in and you put an A in there, it's just not going to let you put it into the
Yes.
form, But it's unfortunately less so with scenarios where you're typing this into Excel or anything else like that. So like I would say 99% of the time it's local files, CSVs, and Excel is probably the worst perpetrator when it comes to needing to capture errors.
Yeah, data structures that give you like the option to enter free text, because like in database, normally you have a data type. If it fails, it fails like before loading it over there, not when it comes to Power BI. But with Excel file, with flat file, text file, CSV file, these kind of things happens a lot, unfortunately, with those.
There was it was one of my first projects that I actually had years ago, but it was probably 8 or 9 years ago. There was a nonprofit that I was working for that kept all their data in Salesforce, but all of their forms on Salesforce were just text input forms, and there was no checks for type or quality, and they wanted to do reporting off it. And I remember certain things like, I would try to pull up city and do a report, and I would find like 18 versions of the same city name for gender or ethnicity or a lot of other stuff related to any kind of attributes. There would just be so many variations of it. The project alone probably had like 20 to 30 hours of data cleanup just to have to go through and match and consolidate and then check, hey, here's 5 things that I think are the same. Can you confirm, do these 5 things equal this one entity? What should that entity be called? So it was one of the most painful cleanups that I had ever done. Just all manual data, and it's just everybody was just typing it in manually with like 12 different people putting in customer data for the people that they were servicing. It was it opened my eyes to like how bad data can actually get in an organization and how worthless it is if it's not normalized.
Yeah, and you mentioned quite important point as well, because like we get customers with their data in CRM or some other systems that is basically like a database behind the scene, but they add custom fields. And when you add custom field, most of the time the type is text. So like city you mentioned is like a problem. Another problem is that like if they ask for a date, and people can go and enter any types of information there.
Yep. In general, the things that I've found that at least help go around some of the city ones is 2 avenues. Is you can either if they don't change that often, meaning like most of the time your customers are going to be from a defined set, give them a pick list to choose from, or give have that somehow connect to like a they can first select country, state, and then city, but somehow provide a drop down for them to access that. Obviously you can provide like number checks, make sure it's actually numerical if they're putting in like age or year instead of just text again. So there's some ways to prevent that. But even with the database, you could still have really bad data if the fields are still kind of free text input, which can happen a lot with very often like client or customer or opportunity input forms where they're just typing stuff in. And at that point, if you just have notes, you can't really do anything for it other than maybe do an AI analysis to determine patterns of the text fields because it's still not normalized.
Right. Yeah. Like data cleaning is always like the most time-consuming part of any BI project. Normally,
Exactly.
finding the right data is always taking some time, and sometimes the reporting helps people to understand that their data is not correct, and there are a lot of mistakes and typos in that, which is good. Like one usage of a report.
Exactly. I know we're getting close, and I usually give like a 10 minute or so buffer just in case. Is there any other things like short little things that you wanted to show us? Any other tips and tricks before we wrap up? Otherwise, I can also see if there's any questions as well.
I would say, like normally when I present these, like the next question that people might come with, I haven't seen that in the chat window, but I'm going to explain that anyway. I'm not going to show a demo. Is that like people say, well, I have 200 tables, then how can I capture all errors that happening across all these tables, all their columns?
Ooh, okay.
That is not going to be done really simply just like this. There are two reasons. One is that the way that environments are handled in Power Query, you can get all the tables in Power Query using like some environment variables such as sections or things like that. That would help as long as you are in Power Query editor environment. But as soon as you load it into Power BI, that would be like mostly blank. So still that part is like there is no real solution for that. There are workarounds, but not a real solution. So I'm not going deep into that. I also have like some blog articles talking about how to capture these errors as part of the column profiling. Like, when, for example, you go and select a column in Power BI, it gives you, like in Power Query, you get this column profile. It's really nice information. Sometimes it is helpful to have this nice information within your report, because then your users can also help you to capture that. Now, table.profile is a really nice function. You can use it just like this, table. It be like this coming up now. It doesn't. Anyway, so I'm going to customer. So basically, just a function like that will give me the profiling result. I'll go and use it as a table in my report, but it doesn't give me the error count. As you see, there are all sorts of things, but not the error count. To get the error count, you need to customize this with like a second parameter. That would be a little bit more coding, which I won't go into that. But I'll send the link to the article to read, and you can post it as a comments or whatever you like over there. So there are steps to go after this. If you are interested in more error handling and doing things like that, this is, I would say, a good beginning to build things on top of.
That's a great question actually from Kendall as well. Is besides obviously your blog, and I'll mention a couple of mine, and you can go off on top of that. And a name I forgot earlier, Chris Webb. He's he's up there as one of those savants of just he knows a ridiculous amount of M code. Most of his articles get pretty technical, I will say. So like that's not an introduction to Power Query. That is when you want to really know how can I add 5% like performance increases to some of my queries. Like Imke Feldman is also really good, and then Ken Pulse, who's written a couple books on them. Those are like, I'd say besides Reza, like my top three other, and Miguel Escobar. Top four then. Those are the other people that I very often go to. And I can drop some links in as you want to maybe comment as well, Reza.
Thank you. Yes, definitely. I would recommend looking at Chris blogs, Imke's. They have like fantastic information on Power Query. Ken, of course, Miguel Escobar. Miguel's focus these days mostly is on custom connectors, but he does almost everything on Power Query. If you want to get geek into that, I would suggest this called Power Query. So there are two important resources. One is Power Query function reference. That is probably something that a lot of people use it. Like this is basically like like each function. This is like DAX function reference. It explains what the function does and things like that. This is, I would say, okay. This is not one of the
Yeah.
main resources we would use. This one is the one that you would require to use. I just forget the name always. Okay, Power Query.
Adam says hi, by the way. He just popped in.
Oh, Adam, hey, how are you? Yo. Okay, Power Query Formula Language Specification. I would strongly suggest this if you want to really get into the hardcore stuff, because this is where you understand the language, the what the basic context are. Like here in the error handling, for example, you see that this explain what the structure of error is. You can download the PDF version of this. This is like 115 pages PDF document. It's not getting updated so much, but it is like invaluable, this document. Whenever normally I find free time, I go and look at it. It's not an easy document to read. It's
yeah.
hard, but it is very helpful.
I peruse here occasionally. Like it's technical, but it's supposed to be, because this is, it's the documentation for a lot of this stuff. Adam actually just had a good mention of one of the thing related. Oh, and yeah, see, I always forget names in Gill Review, but I'll mention this one too. So Alex Powers did a 30 days to Power Query video series, and I remember last year he had like a 30-day challenge of. It's kind of like I don't know if you ever watched the Will It Blend like thing that used to be on YouTube, but he had like a Will It Fold, and it's basically a challenge to see like what can we make query fold and what not, because it's sometimes a little ambiguous of what can or can't. I will say that the thing that's yes, this is publicly released, so I just wanted to make sure I could talk about it. The new query folding icons that are showing up in Power Query Online that are coming to desktop will actually make that so much easier. But it also shows that there's like 5 different states. Yes, it is folding. It's probably folding. It maybe isn't folding. It's definitely not folding, or we don't know. That is so many different statuses of like how can you have that much variability on whether or not something is folding or not? But at least the information is there to tell you what's actually happening.
Yeah, it makes it much easier than before seeing those icons. Hopefully soon will be available in the desktop.
And one other I'll just throw up to here. Gil, I'm sorry I didn't mention you earlier. It's so many names to keep in my head. But yeah, Gil Review also wrote a great book. I even read it last year. A lot of really
Gil, definitely, yes.
Yeah, and I liked his because he had a lot of business scenarios of if you account to this, here is there's a better word for this, but here's the solution that would like solve that problem, the pattern. There you go. Like here's the M code pattern you can do to basically fix a lot of different scenarios. So another great resource. There's a lot of them out there. I think we've named at least 7 different resources that I'm sure there's even more. So whoever's in the chat has a good half of a baker's dozen at least now to go check out.
Yeah.
Let's see if there's any other questions. There's a little bit of chatter, so I'm just seeing if there's anything else that I can throw up into there. There's one longer one, so let me see if this is actually a question or not. Yeah, there's one from NPM, but I don't think there's a specific question in there for us. Just more of a comment about some type of query folding. But yeah, we're just about at the hour. Anything else you want to cover, I think, before we kind of wrap up for the day?
No, I think that was pretty much everything. I'll send you the links and we'll share it over there. But feel free to write your questions here afterwards as well. I'll be more than happy to look into that.
Yep, and again, there's links down below in the description for Reza's conference. I absolutely recommend, if you have the time, sign up for that. A lot of cool content. Slightly biased, of course, because I'll be presenting there, but I'm only one of dozens, if not even more, MVPs that will be presenting on anything and everything related to Power BI. I know you and Layla will have some presentations as well. It's going to be a pretty cool conference, and I just like the fact that it's a community-based one, unlike PAS or Dynamics, both which I have good and other opinions on, but I like to see any type of almost like more humble beginning type ones, like Power BI Days, things like that, that are kind of by the community for the community, are conferences that I think I give the most of my support to, just because it It's less corporatized, you know.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And this is going to be a big event, a lot of planning. So would love to see everyone in there.
Exactly. And everyone else, thanks for tuning in, and I will see everyone next week.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, take a look at our channel memberships as well. And last but not least, please consider sharing this video on social media to help pass on this awesome content and to help the channel grow. So until next time.